So one of the things that I get going over bumps is an occasional clunk, and I believe it is that new longer half shaft axle, whatever, banging against that end of the sway bar tie end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind away some of the top of the tie rod end, and at least try to get a little bit more clearance in there. For those of you that didn't see, when I did the swap, engine swap, the problem ended up being that the half shaft, or the whatever that's back underneath on the back of the engine, didn't work. So I needed an entirely longer shaft to go all the way from the transaxle over to this wheel. And it comes in at a different angle, hence the reason it's closer there than it would have been otherwise. So you can see the contact between that end there and the shaft, and I feel like there's plenty of meat around that I can adjust. This is with the car supported and the suspension drooped a little bit. So I'm going to crank up on the suspension to get clearance and then grind away. Alright, so here's what I ended up doing. With this pry bar, I was able to pull back the sway bar, and then with that strapped it out of place forward, which gave me clearance to get in to here and do some grinding. And right now, with everything relaxed, I've got some clearance. We're going to jack the wheel around and see if we keep that clearance. One thing I did notice is that if you go, as you rotate this, so I still am getting some rubbing. I'm going to need to do some more grinding. So everything looks to be pretty good clearance there. Since I'm still finding oil on surfaces that are above the joint into the oil pan, I will attempt to reinstall this valve cover one more time and hopefully prevent any more oil seepage. Cover is off. I'm just looking around trying to see where, and I had problems with it leaking once before. That's why there's so much RTV on it. Possible that it's getting out around there somehow. I mean, the tops of these two screws are pretty oily. At least the inside here, whatever I used to clean up the sludge, did a good job. Here's the cover with the gasket kind of pulled away, so I have to clean all that up. I have another gasket. Hopefully it fits. I'm going to go get it now. Unfortunately, the supposed replacement gasket appears to be for the 1.6 and not the 1.8 BP engine. So I've cleaned this one up as much as I can. We're stuck with the RTV that's on it. Manual says to apply the silicone sealant to the shaded areas. You can see them there, basically on each corner, where here, etc. Around those bearing cap areas. And that's all we're going to do, and then keep our fingers crossed. And really, these just tighten down snug enough to get a good feel on here. RTV on just those 6 locations, and everything else cleaned, wiped up with brake clean. So now we'll bring the cover with the gasket and install the bolts. This BP engine has always been difficult to restart after running it hard and it's hot. It's like the battery's not giving enough juice. So I've
gone to putting the battery under the hood again where it came from, and that still didn't fix it. So now I'm just going to a slightly larger battery here.
I had to adjust this cross piece to go from the smaller battery to the larger battery. By the way, there, that's the battery I'm running in here. A little bit to get over that one, but they're both in there now. So, onward and forward. I'm getting ready for a racing event, and one of the things I need to deal with, the joint right here between the pipe and the catalytic converter has failed, and that pipe just slides, or maybe it's this end here, the back end, the pipe just slides in. What I want to do is come up with a pipe that connects these two together and be able to get rid of the catalytic converter. So we'll remove this flange here and remove the catalytic converter, bolt the flange, or cut the flange off the pipe or something, and then come up with a way of joining a pipe to that end down there. So the catalytic converter is supposed to be welded to the end of that longer exhaust pipe, but that has failed. And this is the other end here that goes with that flange. So in order to keep this straight, my plan is to cut this off as far back as I can. In fact, I'll probably peel away some of the covering for the catalytic converter. This pipe is back hanging where it needs to be. I will, when I get this stub off, attach it to the flange here and then come up with some sort of pipe to bridge that gap and replace the catalytic converter. So this has been cut, and I'm just curious what the OD of this pipe fitting is. And I'm getting a little, just a shade over 2. So does that mean that a 2-inch tube will fit over that? I'm going to go underneath and measure. But anyway, I've got the catalytic converter removed and cleaned up this flange, so we'll mount it back in place. Alright, so I've stuck that on there best I can. Problem is it aims up, which I think there's some flexibility in the fact that that will adjust. Anyway, that is a straight shot. That measures 1.98. So I'm going to go back there and see if I can loosen that joint so that I'll be able to take this whole pipe out to weld it off the car so I can get to all sides. The price of these is up to $12 a piece. Insane. So instead of clamping, at least on one end, I welded the joint together to save 12 bucks. I got a welder, probably used 50 cents of materials to get that done. I had to pound it on. The OD of this was still kind of messed up, so it was a very tight fit. The other side, however, where the tailpipe or exhaust pipe goes in, is a good slit fit. I've cleaned that up nicely. So I'm waiting for this to cool, and then we'll install this up against the flange of the downpipe, slide the exhaust pipe in with some sealer and bolt it up, and then at least clamp this rear joint. I don't want to go back and forth with the welder on that. Here's what we ended up with. the old catalytic converter leading pipe was cut off and shoved down this coupler and then welded closed, and then the exhaust pipe beyond was shoved on the other end of the coupler as far as it would go and clamped down. It would have been nice if this had gone in farther than it did, but I could only get it in about maybe 3/4 of an inch. Not enough to clamp, and the weld was fine. As tight as I pounded it in, it's not going anywhere. But I think because I couldn't shorten this overall length anymore, unfortunately, this pipe is sitting kind of close to the CV joint boot. Hence the reason I put the thermal wrap around, trying to keep the heat off of the thermal. I'm sorry, keep the heat off of the CV joint boot. So everything is bolted back where it needs to be. That joint is bolted down. Hangers are back in place, and we can put stuff away. And I think the last thing I want to have done before I go racing is an alignment. So I'll make a reservation, take it to a place. So as I talked about last time, that coupler, that flex coupler, because it would not slide over that pipe that came out of the catalytic converter as far as I wanted, was shoving the whole assembly down and really binding up at this joint. So I've cut that pipe in half. Now you can see that when that is together the way it's supposed to be, I've got that much overlap. So I'm going to chop that out of this pipe and then install that butt exhaust coupler. And all the time, hopefully keeping this gap between the CV joint boot and the pipe sufficient. And these hangers, well, hopefully get them situated as necessary. So the MX3 that showed up in the junkyard that had these wonderful seats in them also had quite a bit of other nice stuff. I got the 2 rear struts, which, judging by, I don't know if that's stock Mazda marking or not. So I think they've got to be better than what are probably the original struts here in the back, which I really have to work. They do hold the hatch up, but I have to work to get the hatch to go up. So let's see what happens. We'll do a swap out here. Look at Smart. Supported the hatch with that expanding pole. I've got the one new one in, and I'll go ahead and put the other one in, and then we'll see how much easier it is. Alright, you'll see it when I see it. Well, it actually goes up by itself the last little bit. Look at that. So yes, big improvement. We're going to throw the other ones away. So a while back, using the heat gun, I removed sound deadener from those 2 spots and also from up there in the footwell. I used a lot of acetone to get all the residue off. I never came back to these. It wasn't that important. Someday I probably will, but I may as well make those look as bad. Get some of that weight out. Well, I know that weighs about 2 or 3 pounds at least. So those 2 spots Lower the weight.